It started as a dead man's dream of a city that was never built, became one of the most ambitious theme parks in history, and then spent 4 decades quietly arguing with itself about what it was supposed to be. This is the rise and fall of Epcot, a $1 billion future world identity crisis. The city that Walt never built. Before Epcot was a theme park, it was a genuine urban planning proposal, and a strange one at that. In October 1966, 2 months before his death from lung cancer, Walt Disney sat in front of a camera wearing a suit and used a scale model and a detailed map to describe a city he intended to build in Florida. Not a theme park, a city. Epcot, experimental prototype community of tomorrow, would house 20,000 permanent residents under a climate-controlled dome. No private cars would enter the central hub. People would move by monorail or pedestrian tunnel. The streets above ground would be reserved entirely for foot traffic. Businesses, schools, recreation facilities, and carefully planned residential neighborhoods would radiate outward from the downtown center in a series of concentric rings. Acquiring the land for this vision had taken years. Disney had quietly purchased 27,433 acres of Central Florida, twice the size of Manhattan, using dummy corporations to keep prices from being driven up by speculators. He paid an estimated $5.1 million for property that would be worth billions within a few decades. When the Florida project was publicly announced in 1965, it was enormous news. The theme park element, what would become the Magic Kingdom, was almost a secondary consideration to Walt. The real prize was the land and what he planned to build on it. Walt described it in his own words. Epcot would take its cue from the new ideas and new technologies that are now emerging from the creative centers of American industry. It will be a community of tomorrow that will never be completed, but will always be introducing and testing and demonstrating new materials and new systems. The city would be, as he put it, a living laboratory, a permanent experiment, a working demonstration that American ingenuity and industry could solve the problems of urban life. Disney biographer Neil Gabler has noted that Walt's Epcot vision was influenced by the City of Tomorrow concepts that had captured American imaginations since General Motors' Futurama exhibit at the 1939 World's Fair, and the top-down urban planning philosophy exemplified by figures like Robert Moses. Walt wasn't alone in believing that the problems of 20th century cities, traffic, congestion, pollution, sprawl, could be solved through bold, centralized design rather than organic growth. The difference was that Walt had the land, the financing, and the creative authority to actually attempt it. There was one significant problem with this vision. Nobody who lived in Epcot would own their home. They would be tenants of the Disney company. There would be no voting. Walt was essentially proposing a corporate city-state, benevolently run by his company, in which residents would consent to being permanent subjects of a privately governed utopia. Walt was aware of the governance problem and spoke about it without ever fully solving it. He died on December 15, 1966, before Epcot ever moved past the planning stage. The vision died with him, and the company he had built decided almost immediately that building an actual city was too uncertain, too legally complex, and too fundamentally unlike anything any private enterprise had ever attempted. The Walt Disney Company's board, per one account, concluded that no one would want to live under a microscope, watched constantly and unable to vote. They were probably right about that. Without Walt's personal creative authority, the original Epcot was shelved, the compromise that became Epcot Center. Walt Disney World opened in 1971 with the Magic Kingdom as its centerpiece, and for most of the 1970s, that single park was the entire resort for most purposes. But the idea of building something more ambitious never fully left the company's thinking. By the late 1970s, Disney CEO Card Walker wanted to revisit the EPCOT concept, not as a city, but as a theme park that captured the same spirit of optimism, technology, and international exchange. What emerged from that revisiting was Epcot Center, which opened on October 1st, 1982, as the second theme park at Walt Disney World. The construction cost ranged from $800 million to $1.2 billion, making it one of the largest private construction projects in history at that point. For comparison, the entire original Disneyland had been built for $17 million in 1955. The ticket prices reflected the ambition: $15 for adults at opening, $14 for juniors, and $12 for children. Initial attendance was slower than the Magic Kingdom, partly because Epcot lacked the immediate thrill ride appeal of its neighbor, partly because the park genuinely required a different kind of investment from visitors. But within the first year, attendance grew substantially, and by the mid-1980s, Epcot Center was matching the Magic Kingdom in annual visitor numbers. The park found its audience, and that audience was largely adults, families with older children, and people who wanted something more out of a theme park than a roller coaster. The park was designed in two distinct halves. Future World occupied the front of the park and housed a series of pavilions, each sponsored by a major American corporation, each dedicated to a specific theme: energy, communication, transportation, imagination, agriculture, oceanography, and human health. World Showcase occupied the back half, arranged in a ring around a 40-acre lagoon, with pavilions representing 11 countries, staffed by actual citizens of those nations. The scale of what was built was remarkable. Epcot Center covered a larger footprint than the Magic Kingdom. Spaceship Earth, the geodesic sphere at the park's entrance, stands 180 feet tall and contains more than 2 million cubic feet of space. The World Showcase Lagoon itself covers 40 acres. During the 1980s, additional pavilions continued to open. Horizons in 1983, Morocco in 1984, the Living Seas in 1986, Norway in 1988, and Wonders of Life in 1989. The park was genuinely still being built out 7 years after its initial opening, just as Walt had imagined that Epcot would always be in a state of becoming. The opening ceremony carried genuine grandeur. Water was gathered from rivers, lakes, and oceans from countries around the world and poured into the Fountain of Nations in a ceremony called the International Ceremony of the Waters. A 450-piece marching band performed. Spaceship Earth, the massive geodesic sphere that would become the park's iconic symbol, was dedicated with remarks from Florida's governor and AT&T's president. It felt like the opening of something that mattered, not just an amusement park. As Walt Disney Productions chairman Card Walker addressed the crowd, "These waters will flow together as a symbol of the oneness of humankind and the hope for peace among nations." That is not the kind of language you hear at a roller coaster opening. What Future World actually was. To understand what would later be lost, you have to understand what Future World was in its original form, because it was unlike anything a theme park had attempted before or since. Each pavilion was a partnership between Disney and a major corporation. The sponsor funded the pavilion's construction and ongoing maintenance in exchange for branding throughout. Exxon sponsored Universe of Energy. General Electric sponsored Horizons. General Motors sponsored World of Motion. AT&T sponsored Spaceship Earth. Kraft sponsored The Land. United Technologies sponsored The Living Seas. This corporate partnership model was central to the entire concept. It meant that actual companies with actual stakes in the futures being depicted were putting their money behind the park's optimistic thesis. The attractions inside these pavilions were not rides in any conventional theme park sense. They were experiences that genuinely tried to teach you something. Spaceship Earth took you through the entire history of human communication, from cave paintings, through the printing press, to the computer age, in a slow, graceful journey inside the geodesic sphere. Universe of Energy showed you the formation of fossil fuels through a spectacular audio-animatronic dinosaur sequence, and a circular theater that rotated with giant film screens. The Land took you through working greenhouse environments where actual food was grown using experimental techniques. The living seas contained what was, at the time, the largest saltwater aquarium in the world. Communicore, the interactive exhibit area in Future World's central hub, let guests interact with personal computers at a time when most American families didn't own one. And then there was Horizons. Horizons opened in October 1983, a year after the rest of the park, sponsored by General Electric. It was, by many accounts, the philosophical centerpiece of everything Epcot Center was trying to say. The attraction took guests through a vision of life in the future. Not science fiction, but plausible near-future scenarios, showing families living in sea colonies, desert communities, and space habitats. It drew direct inspiration from Walt's Carousel of Progress at the 1964 World's Fair and was intended as its spiritual sequel. At the end of the ride, guests could choose their own destination: sea, desert, or space. It was optimistic, warm, and genuinely believed that the future was something to look forward to. Horizons was the thesis of the entire park. One Disney historian has written, "It was the attraction that took everything Future World was exploring in its separate pavilions and said, 'This is what it all adds up to.'" Journey into Imagination, which opened in 1983, introduced Dreamfinder, a whimsical inventor character, and his purple dragon companion, Figment. The ride took guests through the landscapes of imagination and creativity. It was beloved immediately and became the park's most distinctive character pairing, alongside the more cerebral tone of Future World's corporate-sponsored pavilions. This was Epcot Center at its most complete, a park that actually tried to mean something, where the rides contained real information, where the sponsors brought genuine resources to bear on serious subjects, and where a family could spend a day and leave knowing more than they arrived knowing. The park's unofficial motto among fans has always been that it respected its visitors' intelligence. That's a harder thing to maintain than it sounds, and it lasted exactly as long as the corporate funding model that supported it, when the sponsors left. The slow erosion of Future World began not with any single dramatic decision, but with a quiet corporate shift. The sponsors started leaving. The model that had funded Epcot Center's pavilions was straightforward. Corporations paid for their pavilions in exchange for branding. When corporations decided the sponsorship wasn't worth the cost, the pavilions lost their funding. And when pavilions lost their funding, Disney faced a choice: find new sponsors, fund them internally, or close them. General Electric ended its sponsorship of Horizons in 1993. Without a sponsor, Horizons closed in December 1994. It briefly reopened in December 1995 because the simultaneous refurbishment of Universe of Energy and World of Motion would have left the eastern half of Future World nearly empty. Horizons kept the lights on for a few more years as a placeholder while its neighbors were renovated. Then it closed permanently on January 9, 1999. The building was demolished in 2000 to make room for Mission Space, which opened in 2003. What replaced Horizons was instructive. Mission Space is a centrifugal motion simulator that replicates a space mission. It's a ride, a very good ride for people who like that sort of thing, and a genuinely nauseating experience for those who don't, notoriously so, in fact, to the point where Disney eventually added a reduced-intensity green mission option for guests who couldn't tolerate the full simulation. But it does not try to teach you anything. It does not tie together the threads of human achievement into a coherent vision of the future. It gives you the sensation of launch. Horizons asked you to think about where humanity was going. Mission Space asks you to hold on. The gap between those two propositions is the gap between what Epcot was and what it was becoming. MetLife ended its sponsorship of Wonders of Life in 2001. The pavilion had opened in 1989 inside a distinctive gold dome and featured Body Wars, Epcot's first genuine thrill ride, and Cranium Command, a charming and highly original show about the workings of the human brain. After MetLife departed, Disney reduced the pavilion to seasonal operation in 2004. It closed entirely on January 1, 2007. For many subsequent years, the Gold Dome stood unused, or served as a festival center during Epcot's seasonal events. As of 2025, Disney still had no announced plans for the space, making it one of the most conspicuous empty pavilions at any major American theme park. United Technologies ended its sponsorship of the Living Seas in 1998. Communicore, the interactive technology exhibit that had occupied a large part of Future World's central hub, closed in 1994. The Kraft sponsorship of the land ended in 1993, replaced by Nestlé in 1993, and running until 2009. World of Motion, the original General Motors Transportation Pavilion, closed in 1996 and was replaced by Test Track, which kept the General Motors relationship but shifted from an educational journey through transportation history to a high-speed vehicle testing simulation. Exxon's Universe of Energy sponsorship ran until 2004, by which point the original show had been replaced by Ellen's Energy Adventure, a comedic retelling featuring Ellen DeGeneres and Bill Nye the Science Guy, which itself finally closed in August 2017 after a 2-decade run. By the early 2000s, Future World had quietly become a different place from what it had been in 1982. The pavilions that remained were either running without their original sponsors, had been converted into conventional thrill rides, or were sitting dark. The corporate sponsor departures also removed something less visible, but equally important: the institutional authority behind the park's content. When General Electric was sponsoring Horizons and telling you about the future of energy and home technology, there was at least an implicit claim that a major American corporation was standing behind that vision. When the sponsors left, the pavilions that remained were left making the same claims with less backing behind them. A theme park telling you about the future of energy is a different proposition than a theme park backed by Exxon, telling you about the future of energy. Whether you trusted Exxon's version of that future is a separate question, but the presence of a real corporate stake made Epcot feel like part of the actual world in a way that most theme parks don't. The IP question. Disney arrived at Epcot's identity problem from a particular direction. The success of its animated film franchises in the 1990s created a new corporate philosophy around intellectual property that reshaped every park the company operated. The Magic Kingdom got new character-branded attractions. Disney's Hollywood studios became largely IP-driven, and the question arrived at EPCOT's gates. Should this park, which had been designed explicitly without Disney characters, without Mickey Mouse in fact for most of its early existence, become more like the rest? The answer Disney gave, gradually, and then all at once, was yes. Frozen Ever After replaced the Maelstrom attraction in the Norway Pavilion in World Showcase in 2016. Maelstrom was a Viking voyage boat ride with educational content about Norwegian mythology and culture. Frozen Ever After is a celebratory tour through the Kingdom of Arendelle from the 2013 Pixar film. The change was loudly protested by a segment of Epcot's fan base, who noted that Norway was one of the places in the park that was actually supposed to represent a real country rather than a fictional one. The 2017 D23 Expo formalized what was coming. Disney announced a major transformation of Epcot that would make it more Disney, timeless, relevant, and family-friendly. Those 4 adjectives contained multitudes. More Disney meant more characters, and IP timeless meant less dependence on specific technologies that dated quickly. Relevant meant different things depending on who was reading it. Family-friendly was a polite way of acknowledging that Future World's original format, sitting in theater seats, watching slow-moving shows about energy production, had trouble holding the attention of children. Remy's Ratatouille Adventure opened in the France Pavilion in World Showcase in October 2021. Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind, an enclosed roller coaster with a backward launch and spinning vehicles, housed in what had been the Universe of Energy Pavilion, opened in May 2022. Journey of Water, inspired by Moana, opened in October 2023. These are all genuinely popular attractions. The Guardians coaster is technically impressive, a reverse-launching enclosed coaster with a music-driven narrative is a real engineering achievement. The debate is not really about quality. The debate is about identity. The critics of this direction have a clear argument. Epcot's original premise was that the real world, real science, real countries, real human challenges was interesting enough to build a theme park around. You didn't need fictional franchises. The Earth's oceans were dramatic enough. The history of human communication was compelling enough. The future of energy was consequential enough. The park's original designers believed that if you told those stories with enough craft and imagination, people would show up and be genuinely moved by them. And for the first decade and a half of the park's existence, they were right. The counter-argument is equally clear. Epcot's original format depended on a corporate sponsorship model that collapsed, a tolerance for slow-moving educational shows that diminished as entertainment competition intensified, and content that became dated faster than it could be updated. Guardians of the Galaxy doesn't become obsolete the way a pavilion about the future of personal computing does. Disney IP has a consistent audience and a consistent maintenance budget. The original Epcot was noble, but it was also financially fragile in ways that the IP-driven version is not. Both arguments are correct. That's what makes the Epcot debate so persistent and so unresolvable. Future World is gone. In 2021, Future World ceased to exist as a named section of Epcot. The park's entrance area was divided into 3 new neighborhoods with new names and color-coded signage. World Celebration, blue, contains Spaceship Earth, the Journey into Imagination Pavilion, and the new Communicore Hall and Plaza. World Nature, green, contains the Land and the Living Seas Pavilions. World Discovery, red, contains Mission, Space, Test Track, and Guardians of the Galaxy. Cosmic Rewind. World Showcase kept its name, the Fountain of Nations, the large circular musical fountain that had stood at the center of Future World since opening day in 1982 and had been the site of the International Ceremony of the Waters at the park's dedication, was removed in 2019 during the construction period. The Leave a Legacy monoliths, large stone structures at the park's entrance engraved with guest photographs installed in 1999 and consistently disliked since, were also removed. The entrance plaza was redone with more natural landscaping, which most visitors found to be an improvement. Not everything about the transformation was a loss. Communicore Hall and Plaza, the new flexible event space that opened in June 2024 in the former Innovations building, takes its name from the original Communicore interactive exhibits from 1982, which is a nostalgic gesture that some fans found meaningful and others found hollow. The original Communicore had you interacting with actual computers at a time when most American families didn't own one. The new space hosts festivals. For longtime Epcot visitors, the accumulation of these changes over 2 decades has produced a specific kind of grief, not for any single lost thing, but for the coherence of an idea. The original park had a thesis. Every pavilion connected to every other. Future World was a sustained argument about human potential, and World Showcase was the living embodiment of the international cooperation that potential required. You could walk through the park and feel the logic of it. The new Epcot is a collection of high-quality individual experiences that do not cohere into an argument the way the original did. As one longtime Disney fan put it plainly, "I'm not angry that the new rides are bad. They're not. I'm sad that no one seems to be trying to say anything anymore. What still works?" It would be dishonest to frame this as pure loss, because parts of Epcot have not only survived, but thrived in ways that genuinely honor the original vision. Spaceship Earth is still there. The geodesic sphere that has been the park's icon since 1982 still takes guests through the history of human communication in a slow, thoughtful journey that remains unlike any other attraction at any Disney park. Narrated by Dame Judi Dench since 2007, it still asks guests to think about where humanity has been and where it might go. The interior of Spaceship Earth was refreshed in 2025 with the addition of GEO 82, an adults-only lounge inside the sphere offering elevated views over the park. That particular choice, turning the iconic structure's upper levels into a cocktail bar, generated its own debate. The Land Pavilion, though its Kraft and then Nestlé sponsorships are long gone, still contains Living with the Land, a boat ride through real working greenhouses where actual food is grown using techniques developed in partnership with NASA, including hydroponics and other experimental growing methods. It remains the most direct surviving expression of what Epcot Center was originally designed to be. The Living Seas, rebranded as the Seas with Nemo and Friends following the addition of Finding Nemo characters in 2004, still contains a massive saltwater aquarium. The Nemo ride that now wraps around it is pleasant, but forgettable. The aquarium is still extraordinary. The World Showcase pavilions remain the most intact expression of the original Epcot concept. 11 countries represented by cast members who are actually citizens of those nations, with food, architecture, film presentations, and cultural programming that genuinely reflect the places they represent. Norway, Japan, Morocco, China, Germany, Italy, France, Canada, the United Kingdom, Mexico, and the American Adventure Pavilion all maintain the essential character they've had since opening. World Showcase has changed the least of any section of the park and by many accounts remains the most coherent with the original vision. Where things stand, the Wonders of Life Dome still stands empty. No announced plans exist for it as of 2025. The original Figment ride, Journey into Imagination, still operates, though it is now on its third version after 2 previous iterations removed Dreamfinder entirely and generated significant fan backlash. The second version, which replaced Dreamfinder with a different character in 1999, was so poorly received that it stands as one of the few theme park attraction redesigns widely cited by name as a failure. Disney eventually restored some elements, but Dreamfinder himself has never returned to the main ride. The current version is generally liked, though his absence remains a point of contention. Epcot today is a park in which the ghosts of its original vision are present in every corner, even when the originals are long gone. The architecture of the original pavilion structures still suggests the coherence of the 1982 design. Spaceship Earth still presides over the entrance. The World Showcase Lagoon still looks exactly as it did 40 years ago. But the connective tissue, the sense that every part of the park was arguing for the same idea, has eroded across 4 decades of corporate decisions, sponsor departures, IP additions, and structural reorganizations. The park's attendance tells its own story. In 2017, Epcot dropped from 2nd to 3rd place in attendance ranking among Walt Disney World's 4 parks. The first time in the park's history that had happened. The transformation announced that same year was, at least in part, a direct response to that decline. There is a version of this story where everything that has happened to Epcot is simply the inevitable consequence of time and change, and the people who mourn what was lost are being sentimental about something that was never going to survive unchanged. Technology dates. Sponsors leave. Children grow up expecting different things from theme parks than their parents did. The original Epcot Center was extraordinary for its era, but it was also a product of its era, and that era ended. Maybe all of this was simply unavoidable. There is another version where a genuinely unique thing, a theme park that treated visitors as intelligent adults, that had an actual philosophical argument behind it, that connected American corporate optimism to international cultural exchange through a lens of genuine wonder, was traded away for market share, franchise IP, and the kind of broad family entertainment that any park can provide. That version is harder to dismiss when you look at the empty gold dome of Wonders of Life, or stand where Horizons used to be. Walt Disney wanted to build a city that was never finished, because being finished was beside the point. The park that carried his city's name honored that impulse in its best years. A park that is always evolving, always testing, always trying to say something about where humanity is going. That is what Epcot was designed to be. Whether the current park is still trying to say something beyond "we have new rides" is a question that depends on who you ask. The debate itself, still active and still heated among the park's most devoted visitors, is its own kind of tribute to how much the original meant. And that is the story of the rise and fall of Epcot, a $1 billion future world identity crisis. If this brought back memories of Future World, or made you furious about what happened to Horizons, hit the like button and subscribe. We cover the history behind the places that shaped how people think about the future. New videos every week.